We're very grateful today to have Anam Thubten Rinpoche with us, a master of the Nyingma tradition of Vajrayana Buddhism, here in Hong Kong today to talk to us about his teachings. Thank you so much for joining us, Rinpoche. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's my pleasure.
In the video Timeless Sacredness, it was made this September, you say that your friend, a Western Buddhist teacher, had no strong attachment to being Buddhist, which you said was a mark of maturity. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Right. Presently, I identify myself as a Buddhist and a Buddhist teacher. There are two reasons why I identify myself as a Buddhist teacher, because I was born and raised in Buddhist culture, and also I am very much a firm follower of Buddha Shakyamuni. But at the same time, I totally appreciate the statement made by my Western friend, who's a Buddhist teacher, a quite popular one. The reason I think this is a sign of maturity is that all the problems in the world that we see today come from division. Division between humanity. It's not just a problem in modern days. If you look back the human history, we have around perhaps 5,000 human history. At least that is a recorded human history, and most war, violence, the worst war came from a division, fighting among each other, because we think there is intrinsic division or duality between humanity, Chinese versus Indians,
Yes.
Westerners versus Asians, Christians versus Buddhist versus Hindus, and so forth. And I just don't see there's any really hope for world peace. Or I just don't see that humanity would put aside all the unnecessary divisions that separate us, and to work together towards the common goal, which is to fight against poverty, injustice, external suffering as well as also mental suffering, and to achieve our goal, which is to have a very peaceful world with generosity and loving kindness. And I don't think that Buddha was running around and calling himself as a Buddhist.
As a Buddhist.
And perhaps the whole idea of being Buddhist came into being much later. And I understand when somebody says that they're Buddhist because they're practicing the path of a Buddha, then it's totally understandable. But most people are using this label, being Buddhist, as a way to divide,
to set themselves,
to separate themselves from non-Buddhist, the Christians or the Muslims or the Hindus. To me, it's kind of very dangerous separation, even though it's a state of our consciousness, because when you look around, we're all human beings. We're not born as a Buddhist, we're not born as a Hindus. It's all just this mental construct that has no reality. And this is not something that I'm speaking. Even some of the greatest Buddhist teachers transcend all religious identities. For example, the Buddhadasa, who was perhaps one of the most brilliant, prominent Buddhist teacher in Theravada Buddhism talent, who lived in last century, actually said, in the highest understanding, there is no such thing in Buddhism. So he's already transcending the whole Buddhist identity. And also when you look back, the great Indian Mahasiddhas like Saraha, and they were a Buddhist, but they're not so much attached to the Buddhist identity. They're much more non-sectarian and universal. So no later we have to go beyond those religious identities.
So letting go of religious identities, divisions, that's the only sort of path to world peace.
Absolutely. There's no problem being Buddhist, I'm still Buddhist, but not use that label to divide or separate us from other people. I call myself Buddhist, But when I look at the Christians, I don't think I'm different from them. I see they are human beings. The only reason I call myself as a Buddhist is because I'm following the path of a Buddha. So I don't regard myself as a Buddhist because I wanted to separate myself from non-Buddhist.
Yes.
I'm calling myself as a Buddhist because I'm practicing the path of Buddha.
Of the Buddha.
And also we have this joke in America. This expression Jubu means there are lots of Jewish people who become Buddhist.
Jubu,
We call them Jubu.
Yeah.
So reasons I made a joke that we can be Jubu. Everybody can be Jubu.
Everyone
we can be
Jubu.
Buddhist, Hindu, Christian. We can be anybody.
Fantastic.
We can be all of them together. Why not?
Why not?
I think that's the future of humanity. Right now, it's a hard concept to sell, but
It's a hard concept to sell. Yes.
you know, something very difficult, and then eventually it takes like 1 century before people totally embrace it.
Yes. In the same video, you say that you feel it's almost a duty to talk about the topic of all-pervasive sacredness.
Right.
Again and again, you mentioned it quite a lot. So what do you mean by the term and why do you think it's important?
The sacredness is very much the hallmark of Mahayana Buddhism and also especially the Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhism. In Tibetan, this is called Takpa Ramjam. Takpa means sacredness, Ramjam means all-pervasive. And this is perhaps one of the most liberating as well as enlightened and also kind of advanced philosophy that existed. It is a notion that everything is sacred. Everything that exists is sacred. We human beings are sacred. Everybody is sacred. Men are sacred. Women are sacred. Buddhists are sacred. Hindus are sacred, everybody is sacred, trees are sacred, rocks, ocean, even the garbage,
Everything.
even the trash can, everything is sacred. And that's why we cannot really reject anything. We have to learn how to open heart and to love the totality, the entire cosmos, and to realize that this whole universe is the Buddha paradise. That's the true Buddha paradise. And to realize that every living being as the manifestation of the Dharmakaya or the unborn Buddha, and there is some crisis happening right now in 21st century, which is a spiritual crisis. By the way, there are many good things that are happening in 21st century, but I see there is a spiritual crisis happening. That is, we are losing connection with this notion of all-pervasive sacredness. People are not feeling the sacredness in themselves or in relationship to their world, and that's why there's an emptiness inside. So people are trying to fill this inner emptiness by making more money, indulging in more essential pleasures, entertainment. And we are so wealthy right now in comparison to 1 century ago. Everybody's living like queens and kings these days. Like, look at even this place. We are
very fortunate and we are very
staying right now. And this perhaps would be like a palace in the old days. And now so many people, perhaps millions of people live in this kind of modern, very comfortable, luxurious apartment, like this very place. But truth is that the people are unhappy. Everywhere is filled with this
misery
emptiness, and you can go to anywhere. You can go to North America, United States, or you can go to South Korea, anywhere, and there's some kind of this inner poverty. People are really depressed, unhappy, and finding their life is a little bit meaningless. And then there's this fallacy, believing that if we become more popular or make more money, or if we marry to the right person, or somebody who's beautiful, we have money, then we'll be happy. But after people achieved all of them, they're still empty. And in my understanding, this is coming from not realizing there's a sacredness in each of us. There's sacredness, everything.
Yes.
And by awakening to the all-pervasive sacredness, maybe we'll be happier, and we'll respect ourselves, we respect each other, and we respect also nature too, which we are destroying right now.
Absolutely.
Because we are using nature as object
Yes.
to feed our ego, to feed our insatiable desire.
Your book, The Magic of Awareness, introduces readers to learn to rest in the natural ground of existence, or
Right.
pure consciousness. As you say, some teachers don't teach this until the students have a lot of groundwork or they've mastered the basics. Do you feel that there are benefits to doing the groundwork, which can involve quite a bit of traditional practices commonly associated with Tibetan Buddhism?
It's very useful to go through the groundwork, the foundational practice, and that exists in Buddhist tradition. Personally, I have done many of those foundational practices, and many of them are very transformative. At the same time can be a little bit arduous. And then when you look around, and most people in this world are really busy. They are busy by trying to acquire education, or to get degrees. Many people are trying to finish their education, like going to universities to get all these degrees, like PhD, and then once they finish their training and they go back and they have to work. They have to work quite a lot just to even survive.
Yes.
Like Hong Kong is an example. You have to work
yes.
hours,
Plenty of
even
stuff.
to just pay your
Yeah.
bills.
Yes, absolutely.
We are not talking about becoming wealthy. We're talking about just surviving barely day to day. And many people really don't have the time to go through those very systematic traditional practices, even though there's tremendous value in those systems.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the old days, the traditional religious model was to reject this world. And somehow the old traditions taught that there's some kind of fundamental discrepancy or even conflict between the spiritual life and this world.
Yes.
And that's why so many people become renunciate. Basically, many people dropped out the conventional society.
Yes, they
once and
left
forever.
conventional society. Yeah.
And that worked very well for the way of life in all days, but it's not working very well. People who drop out society are called the hippies in the West.
Yes, yes.
Or hobos.
Yeah,
or homeless.
Right, that's an especially harsh term.
Yes, or homeless.
Yeah, or
You
homeless.
become homeless when you drop out of society.
But that's a very important point, Rinpoche, because if you drop out of society today,
Yeah.
it means something completely different to what it meant 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
100 years you'll be worshipped.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
think you're like some kind of enlightened being,
like a
transcend the
mendicant.
world.
Yes.
Yes, and the people will be like bound to. These days, people run away from you. They think you're a little mentally ill or you're a loser.
Yeah,
So the whole structure has been changed, and we can be stubborn. We can't really force people to kind of adapt to some structure that worked in a particular century. But also, when I look around, there are very serious meditators, and who have done lots of the traditional practices. After many years spiritual practices in Buddhist tradition, there is some kind of epiphany that people achieve, and that is realizing that we don't have to reject this world. We don't have to reject this human life.
So we don't have to.
You don't have
reject
to.
it.
And there's a realization that this human life is the Dharma. This is the Buddhism.
Yes.
And everything that we are going through everyday life, sadness, suffering, death, dying, getting married, everything is Buddhism. Everything is Dharma. If we are able to embrace all of them with love, courage, and awareness. As a matter of fact, the whole path of Bodhisattva is not to run from this world,
No,
but to engage with the world. And that
Yes.
was a very radical movement in Indian Buddhism, because the ancient Buddhists fell into this trap of duality, and they totally reject this human world,
Yes.
and they thought that There's no virtue, there's no merit, there's no dharma in this human world. Everything is dirty, everything is sinful.
Yeah.
As far as the human world is concerned, all these beautiful things that we love in the human world, the music, dance, sensuality, are bad. And so nirvana is this thing, and that is totally devoid of all humanness, and devoid basically this world.
Yes.
Nothing has to do with humanness. So the movement of bodhisattva is to almost not so much protest against it, but to give this to me much more enlightened perspective, which to realize that we don't have to reject this human world.
No.
And we can find the Dharma, we can find enlightenment, we can find the love, compassion in the human world while embracing pretty much everything, embracing relationship, marriage, work, raising children, stuck in the traffic, and still you can find enlightenment, the Dharma in all of them. And they use this beautiful expression. Knowledge in Mahayana Buddhism is like the lotus blossoming in the mud. Lotus symbolizes enlightenment to the Buddha mind, and mud symbolizes the human world, which can be sometimes messy and sometimes not so blissful either. There's lots of pain and the suffering, but we have to embrace it and to become enlightened by running towards it instead of running away from it.
And in that book, and actually this is quite related to all these ideas of letting go, dropping all dualities and dichotomies, you advise us to drop all concepts. But we're extremely attached to concepts, and even from the moment we try to let go of the concepts, we feel this fear in us, a sense of ungroundedness that starts to arise when our sense of solidity dissolves. How do you advise us to approach that problem?
Ultimately, the goal of a Buddhist path is to go beyond all our concepts. This is very much taught in the Pranjana Paramita Sutras, in Chan tradition in China, as well as the Zen in Japan. And also this is very much the central concept of the Dzogchen and Mahamudra and Tibetan Buddhism. And they all teach and that the way to the freedom is through dropping all our concepts. As you stated, it's very difficult to drop all our concepts. This is perhaps the most challenging thing to do entire Buddhist practice. It's more challenging than to do 100,000 prostrations. It's much more challenging to give $10 million to a temple. It's much more challenging to do something extremely mind-blowing, heroic, like maybe go on a fasting for days and days. Those things are not that challenging. People think these things are challenging. It's not. Sometimes they can be very much ego rewarding. It can boost our ego. We think, oh, I'm now great, I'm heroic, I'm doing something that people can do. But dropping your concepts is really challenging because you can't have to be enlightened. And we don't want to be enlightened. I call fear of enlightenment. And that is the greatest hindrance on Buddhist path, is our fear of enlightenment. We are actually afraid of being enlightened. There's a little bit of paradox going on. On the other hand, as a Buddhist, we pray, we recite sutras, we meditate, and we wish that we become enlightened. But actually, we don't like enlightenment. We're afraid of being enlightened because enlightenment means like the total fail, the total loss to the ego.
Because that seems to be because the Buddha said, the Dharma is like a medicine.
That's right.
But it's like almost as if we're afraid to take all of the medicine, because once we start to dissolve that ego, then what I've mentioned, the solidity starts to lose its ground, and we are
that's very
feeling
frightening.
How do we deal with that sort of?
Yes, and when we start losing the solidity, if we can actually love it, and that sense of no ground is what really nirvana is, and that's what the true nirvana is. If we can be okay and be cool by dissolving all the solidities, all our egoic identities, all the sense of security, certainty that we're holding on to, when they start dissolving in front of us, because somehow we decide to open our heart and drop our concept, and then if we are not afraid of standing on that groundless ground, if we can enjoy it, then
we can enjoy it. We can enjoy that. We can feel at home in that groundedness.
That's what nirvana is. Nirvana is not physical location. Nirvana is the state of non-attachment in our minds. That's what true nirvana is. And non-attachment, the aranga, is actually the main practice in all Buddhist tradition, either Theravada, Mahayana, or Vajrayana. And all these Buddhist practices are designed as a skillful means to experience non-attachment. But the true non-attachment is not really about shaving your head and becoming monk or nuns and trying to cut the attachment to wine or delicious candy. That's not what really true non-attachment is. True non-attachment is a state of mind where we are no longer bound to the illusion of solidities, but we are okay, and we are totally embracing this liberating, frightening, as well as also beautiful truth of no ground, no solidity. It's like dancing in the sky and having a good time, even though there's no stage underneath your feet.
Absolutely.
And you have to be kind of courageous to do that.
Yes.
And that's what Buddha said, you have to become bodhisattva in order to become light. And the bodhisattva means the hero, the heroine, means who has the courage to love that groundless ground.
So you would say that it takes courage, and this is a theme of some of your talks, isn't it, and your book?
Yes.
To say that we must be brave and be willing to...
We have to be truly courageous to really understand the Buddhist path.
And do you sometimes have students who say to you, Rinpoche Master, I'm scared, or I feel afraid, and do you say the same similar things to them? To say, be brave, don't worry.
I always said that. I encourage them to be brave. I tell people that you're doing really good because at least you're experiencing that fear, which is a very good sign, because most people are not experiencing that fear because they even don't go into that direction. For many people, the door to the liberation is totally closed. They even don't touch this truth. Whatever you like call, you can call it impermanence, or you can call it the emptiness, or you can call it Buddha nature. They even don't have the interest or curiosity to get close to that truth and to feel somehow this fear, this primal fear of losing everything. And when people have that fear, I tell them that they are making big progress along the path.
Making good progress.
Oh yeah, at least they can feel fear, and then now they can work with that fear.
Yes.
I tell them, just be with that fear. You don't have to reject that fear, and then stay with that fear and keep resolving. And I always ask people, what would happen if you don't resist? If you just let everything dissolve in your consciousness? And the answer usually is always the same. I will be happy, I will be free.
You'll be free.
And then sometimes people change their mind and they want to go all the way to the heart of matter and to drop all their concepts and really love the freedom.
You tell us that the philosophical teachings of the Buddha and of other great adepts in various wisdom traditions are the same, and that the truth doesn't belong to a single group of people. I'm just curious, what would you say about the highest reality in Hinduism of Brahman and the union of emptiness and clarity in Buddhism? Are they identical or are they different? What do you say to that?
It really all depends on whom we are asking this question. I believe that if we invite those enlightened Hindu masters and Buddhist masters, they may all agree the same truth. They may teach the same truth, but as a doctrine, yes, there is a big difference between Hinduism and Buddhism. As a Buddhist, we regard most religious traditions are eternalism. And Buddhism transcends both nihilism and eternalism. From that point of view, the Buddhism and Hinduism has a very fundamental difference.
Yes.
Because Buddhism is transcending all notions of eternity, like Atma and Brahma, and also Creator.
Yeah.
The notion of a mighty being who created this world. And then Buddhism teaches more the interdependentness. Yes. Everything comes into being through cause and conditions. And also Buddhists transcend this idea of a solid personal self.
Yes.
The no self, or in Pali, anicca. There are, yes, philosophical disagreement, but to me there are a little bit of semantical differences. And in the essence, personally, I believe that they're all teaching the same truth. Either they're called Brahman or emptiness. But for common people, there's a big difference. For people who are enlightened, perhaps there's only one truth. It's just we are calling it with different names.
Different name.
And that's very good news for the world. So finally all the religious people can come together and realizing that we're not so different from each other as we think.
Not so different.
I think that's the only hope for the world peace.